Welcome. Welcome to the Khyber Pass podcast. I am your host, Paul Metzger. We bring you each week an interview with an improviser that has performed at the Khyber Pass Cafe Thursday night music series focusing on the avant. This week we have Dave King, percussionist for three main projects that he has right now would be Happy Apple, who played this week, also The Bad Plus, as well as Dave King Trucking Company. We were real happy to have Dave come and play, and afterwards he sat down with us to discuss some of his background, where he comes from, where he's at now, and where things might head for him, as well as ideas he has about improvisation, composition. But as always, it's brought to you by the Khyber Pass Cafe. Restaurant by day, featuring authentic Afghan cuisine. So, let's move in now to this week's interview with Dave King. First would be where you come from, where things started for you with music as a younger cat.
Well, I started playing piano when I was really young. Mm-hmm. My parents were not musicians, but they were inclined to have a piano in the house because my mother played piano. She played some violin, but they weren't like professional musicians or anything. She was an English teacher, and my dad played some clarinet. But so they liked music and had a bunch of records.
What are they listening to?
They were listening to both classical and jazz, but also 50s rock and roll. And my parents used to dance to 50s rock and roll. Really great dance. They were great. They were like from the era.
Yeah.
Dancing to things like Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens and so they have records and 45s and vinyl and they would do that. And then I have three brothers and we all were made to take piano lessons, but I continued because I really liked it. So I was sort of musically.
You stuck with piano.
I stuck with it and was super inclined. I was super inclined to, we had a piano and my brothers and I all took piano lessons. I stuck with it. I was the only one that really caught on with, and this is when I was about 5.
Well, what caught on? What was happening with you? Like you.
It just felt like I was sort of, music sort of made sense to me. You have an emotional reaction. I saw it in my son when he was born, even though he's not a super serious musician yet. He's 14, but I saw him reacting the same way I did, which was you could see the emotional reaction. Some people, some people have really heavy emotional reactions to music at a young age, and some people are just music is just a fun thing that's back there. And I wasn't into like kids songs or anything. I was listening to some music at that point, listening to some jazz records of my dad's, and listening to classical music, and I.
When you say that, who would be someone you would have heard in the house, like of a jazz album or a classical album?
Well, a classical album is I would hear probably things like Beethoven symphonies,
Right.
just a lot of the stuff that someone would have. Let's say they were a part of the CBS Record Club version of classical music.
Yeah,
So no one was playing me Stockhausen yet.
Right.
It was more like, Beethoven, and then really listening to
three
Beethoven.
Ds, man.
Exactly. And so you'd have some of those, and some great recordings, some Philadelphia Orchestra, London Symphonic, things like that. So I would have seminal recordings of masterworks to go through.
Yeah.
And then jazz records, a lot of things like Count Basie, some big band things, but the better big bands like some of the Duke Ellington bands and things like that. And then things like here and there like Coltrane, My Favorite Things or something. Something that someone would have that was in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, Brubeck probably.
Yep, exactly. Or some Bill Evans records or things like that. And when I really got going on that, when I started, you're 10 years old, I was 5 to 10 playing piano, but then when you want to join the school band, you can't play piano. No. It's like they don't have the piano in the school band, so in 10 years old, I was like, okay, band instrument, I'm like, I'll play the drums. And I ordered a pair of drumsticks out of the Cub Scout magazine, Boy's Life. They had on the back, like, things you could order if you sold.
Oh, man, you're breaking my heart.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I ordered a pair of drumsticks that got delivered in the mail, and that's how I got my drumsticks going.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then I had a paper route and did the whole thing where I then had to buy I borrowed a snare from school.
Right.
And so I had a snare to practice on, and just getting rudiments and things together, and then continued playing piano, studying it until I was about 14. Now I still play piano, but I just, I can't really, I use it as a compositional tool, of course. I can't claim to be any that good a pianist, but I still play. But
does it show up on any of your recordings?
Yeah,
ever?
I've done some recordings of some piano stuff, but it's more like playing my own through composed music. You know what I mean? Like it's not. I can't sit down and play. I can't blow over In Walk Bud or something. But I can. I can play a blues, and I can. But I can play my music, which is important. And so when I play my music, even for people like the pianists of the Bad Plus or other things I work with pianists, I can play my music for them, which is important to me. That exists off the page. It's important for me to have my music spoken like orally. I like to teach the music that way, almost like an older jazz tradition. And so I just went to school band, and I just really got into drums really heavily, and bought a drum kit when I was 13, and got heavily into. By the time I was in 13 or 14, 15, I started getting heavily into trying to play jazz drums, and I had a teacher, and then in high school, I ended up studying with the drummer from around, great drummer from here, I'm sure you know, is Joe Police.
Mm.
And he was more of a straight ahead jazz guy, and I worked drumming and theory and things with him. And then I also started following around and begging lessons with Erik when I was a kid, because I realized Erik lived here when I was 15 or 16. And I was like, oh my God. So I used to go to every single performance of his. And then when I turned 18, I moved to New York right out of high school. I never went to music school.
Mm-hmm.
And I went I tried to inject myself right in the scene without knowing anyone. Very difficult. So I ended up coming back after about 9 months.
Rough. What year would that be?
1988.
Damn.
And then I was, pre-Giuliani, some French Connection looking shit.
Yeah.
Abel Ferrara films going on right down the street.
And you're walking right through.
Yeah, and I was like, maybe I'll gestate a little more before I try to tackle it. I wasn't going out with some sort of blind ignorance. I was going out with the idea that I'm nobody and know nothing,
right.
And maybe I can make it work as almost like an apprentice and meet some young cats and do some sessions and do whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And instead, then I came back to Minneapolis for a minute, and then I moved to Los Angeles, because I thought it'd be interesting to try and play all kinds of music, and I thought maybe I could get some experience in a less totally intense scene.
Yeah.
And then I lived out there for most of the 90s until I was about 26, 27, so that's how I started. And then when
Were you playing out there then?
Yeah, I was playing quite a bit,
mm-hmm.
and in all different forms, and also doing studio work, and
mm-hmm.
and then I would go play in New York with some friends of mine that lived there, and that's actually how the Bad Plus started. Was those guys already lived in New York,
mm-hmm.
so I used to go to New York, and then when we formed Happy Apple, and when I moved back to Minneapolis in the late '90s, and then we started, bombing New York from the outside, and using some of the connections that I had from people that I grew up with playing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the long short of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting arc. So you end up at the end of it with, I'm sure more projects than I'm aware of, but I know Bad Plus, Happy Apple, and Dave King Trucking Company.
Yeah.
Which are, as far as like the jazz scene, not here,
Mm-hmm.
but more like the jazz scene. They're kind of known as Vanguard combos.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying how they're.
Yeah.
So how does that feel for a guy like really so self-taught? Like you didn't go to like get some music after thing. You went right into living it.
Yeah, and it's ironically, sometimes I'll do master classes at some heavy university programs.
Yeah.
I've done New School, and I've taught at, I was an artist in residence at Duke University. I've taught at Stanford and Banff, and I've taught in many schools in Europe. Done master classes, and I always kind of started out by saying, sometimes there's this idea that that's the only road, and I always talk about the idea that music school is a very good path for some people.
Yeah.
And some people, it's a useless path. Mm-hmm. And unless you're working towards a degree to become an educator or whatever, which then that's wonderful for you. My goal was to be a performer of music, and I felt like, number one, I didn't have any money for school,
mm-hmm.
and I just felt like I felt like I was ready to learn by doing. At that point, I felt when I was 18, I thought I had a pretty decent amount of technique and some of the knowledge of the music to where at least I could be young and dumb.
Around
and not
18?
Be a I could be young and dumb and not make a total ass of myself.
Mm-hmm. Not total.
Yeah. Definitely room to make an ass of myself. But, I wanted to throw myself in and try to learn it the way that I learn things. I think the way that my system works for me is more of an osmosis form of learning and self-teaching. Mm-hmm. I had great teachers though with Joe and things like that.
I hear that in your playing. Your rudiments are so strong. It's only, I don't know of another way it can be achieved to have it be so integrated, and then having a teacher and putting in the woodshed time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Having private teachers and hitting the shed very hard. Exactly.
Yeah, I hear that in your playing. It's when, especially drumming, which I'm pretty crazy for, to hear that particular kind of playing, and yeah, it gets to me. You know,
I appreciate that, man.
So were you ever like in drum corps or any of that type of thing?
No, I was never, but again, I did a lot of work on my own. In fact, I used to practice classical snare drum etudes. That's why I've done a lot of contemporary classical music at this point. You know, I mean, I've worked with the Mark Morris Dance Group, played Stravinsky and Ligeti and Babbitt and heavy pieces that I've adapted to drum set and also snare drum. So I mean, it's more like that voracious appetite for all the music. So
yeah,
I mean,
you want in, man.
For me, I just want to. If I'm gonna do the shit, I'm one of those people that, you know, for better or worse, I have to feel like there's no bullshit involved. Like I don't want to kind of skate through the thing in a way that, you know, I'm not saying that happens, but I just don't feel like phoning in stuff I already know so well that it's a riff. And so
we've all been to those shows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where someone is playing really well, but it's boring as fuck because you can tell it's some sort of well-worn path.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, improvising is very important to me, and also through composition and all these other disciplines. And I think at the end of the day, the ensembles I work in are these sort of spaces that utilize a lot of different tools from the shed, and some are very, you know, a lot of thick forms with odd times, and then some folk melodies that are free and open and played with the same discipline. And with or some minimalist concepts or all the other things played with the same discipline, or some simple themes that are played with the same discipline as something that's very dense and polyrhythmic. And I think that's very important, to not have a judgment or hierarchical opinion of the music.
Your sets cover a lot of ground that way.
Yeah.
Of you can have just these very recondite passages that, you know, just to be able to play the head would take a little doing.
Yeah.
And then some things that sound a lot more homey.
Yeah, exactly.
And but they all sound like they're of a whole.
Yeah.
It comes off that way. You mentioned improvisation, and that's one of the main reasons for this podcast is to have different kind of players talk about that, from noise cats to straight ahead jazz guys and everything in between. So when you're approaching improvisation within a piece that you've composed the piece, but there's some open areas, how do you approach that? Is there a general headspace you get to, or?
Yeah, you know, for me, let's say if you're dealing with a couple different forms, let's say I was dealing with a strict rhythmic form, harmonic and rhythmic form, or dealing with a rubato but still harmonic form, so something that moves through changes but has a rubato feel and temperature, or something that's straight ahead time and is either, you know, a swinging thing or something with a very straight form or something that's got a rock beat or something, whatever. Again, I try to meet the things on their own playing field, whatever they are. I don't try to say like, oh, this is I hate it, for instance, when you have, I witness this sometimes where people say, oh, you're going to play free, and then all of a sudden everybody is just like going crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, that doesn't mean, free music does not mean, when we talk about freedom as a human being, that doesn't mean also when we rip our faces off and start like acting all hedonistic. That's not freedom. You know what I mean? That's another form of, that's hedonism. You know what I mean? I'm interested in free playing when it's also very seriously compositional. I think the heaviest, my free jazz heroes, from Cecil Taylor to Albert Eiler to, if you'd call that free jazz or whatever you want to call it, there's a deep sense of compositional thinking going on at all times.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, your ignorance of free music is profound, because it's so for me, the challenge of improvising within harmonic or non-harmonic structures, through rubato, through time, through whatever, I think of it as the same discipline needed as playing through complex rhythmic forms, which we did tonight. We played several complex rhythmic forms. We played some straight ahead swing thing, which takes a discipline and a tradition that needs serious work and listening, and everyone knows that. and a deep connection to the historical sources, and then also free music and rubato ballads and things where there's a sensitive, idea that the instruments are all one instrument and everyone thinking very sympathetically, non-ego, whenever thinking very dynamically and sympathetically. All of these tools, all I'm thinking about every single time is how do I make these things an even part of my, so my thinking doesn't necessarily get like, oh, I better buckle in now because this is this up-tempo thing in 13, and I got, oh, thank God that rubato ballad's over. That get that out of the way. Now I really got to think. It's more like I think about that all with it. It's all a great challenge to be able to be the single person very present with a voice within several different disciplines. And almost like the painter Gerhard Richter. I bring that up sometimes, someone that can deal with abstraction and deal with photorealism and formalism with the same touch, the same eyes, the same intensity, approach minimalism and very dense technical requirements with the exact same non-hierarchical judgment. Just like, no, this shit deserves this, and there's no need to be slick and play over the bar and whatever. This is a statement that is best served very straight. Mm-hmm. And this is a statement that, that's why I'm a fan, like you're saying, like noise improvisers or straight ahead jazz, whatever. I'm one of those people that has an openness to any form of creative music, as long as I feel that it is this thing that's like meeting me as a fan with an honest, like, hey, we're not fucking around. This isn't a bunch of riffs, and this isn't a bunch of, stuff we know we can pull off. Mm-hmm. That to me gets a little boring. Mm-hmm. And so I try to remain in a space where I'm not quite sure I can pull it off sometimes. Yeah. And no matter how simple, I treat it like, let's if I'm playing a ballad, for instance, I'm sorry for running on, but I'll say it.
No,
like playing a straight ahead ballad in jazz. And I'm not sitting back there like this, waiting for my, I'm not just sitting there letting I'm like, all right, I'm gonna play the most fully invested brushes playing 4/4 in a ballad that I can, and hey, check that out.
You're all in all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to kick back and be cavalier.
Yeah,
Sounds like that's not your bag.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not quite sure. My opinion. Maybe this is hardcore, but I'm not quite sure. See, some people have a hardcore opinion about either improvised music or jazz, or like it's either straight ahead or this, or I only like free jazz. I only like the avant-garde. I only whatever. For me, it's more like all of the shit is killing if everybody's all in.
Yeah.
And it's weak if you're not. It's like it becomes some ego art form that's like it just becomes something that looks a little bit more like it's macking to me. And if you're in there with you can be playing the most incredible technical shit, but if you're in there with your soul too, then you can do all that macking and do all that stuff. But fine, I love it. I love hearing somebody just rip. You know what I mean? Come on.
Yeah.
But it's like, without that thing that feels also vulnerable, feels also dramatic and invested spiritually on some level, however you want to classify what that is, then to me I can understand why nobody wants to listen to it. It vibrates in a lower space on some level. So
yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah. Sorry to go off.
No, that's interesting to think about. It's provocative. Yeah. So, what about the idea of if you were to be asked to, let's say, I'm sure you have been, to sit down solo behind a kit and improvise a piece on the spot? What's that like for you when it's wide open?
Yeah.
And it's just you. There aren't other cats. That's something different.
Absolutely, and I've had to do it for education purposes and a couple of clinic situations, one thing I can tell you is I always, without question, and I don't know if I pull it off every time, but I always, without question, try to put the drum set in a space of a compositional, melodic, tonal situation. I avoid at all costs the falling back into some flashy scenario. In fact, I have a very strong opinion against the idea that the drums are all of a sudden this thing to just do loud roll, double, like quads and these sort of all these things. And some really remarkable musicians, drummers, sometimes just go to that space when they're by themselves. And I fully cannot get with that. I usually, if I'm playing something solo and doing whatever, I'm usually very aware of trying to make some sort of structured, thematic scenario. And I don't mean rhythmically structured. It can be open, whatever. But things that can follow a line, almost like a line drawing or something, where I've got to think like some sort of arc.
Puts me in mind of things I've heard from Max Roach, and his talking about the flow
Totally.
or arc as poetry and punctuation.
Exactly.
And rather than here's a triple flamacue headbutt or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is just a shortcut,
Yeah, but it's interesting to hear it that way, and it's a thing that we've had drummers here at the Khyber play solo. Cats that have played a lot, like Phil Hay, local drummer who I've followed quite a bit from way back. He's it made him nervous, that idea to play solo, and because it's you're just kind of working without a net. You don't have a set structure, and that's an interesting space for a musician. I think
absolutely.
It's intriguing to me.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'm put in the position to do something like that, and sometimes I just don't have it. Sometimes I find myself, my desires for doing something, some magnum opus of free, melodic, orchestral, thematic drum music falls very short. One thing though is I usually never try to rely on some cheap thrill out of it. So I usually just crash and burn in Artland.
You'd rather crumble.
I would.
Yeah, than to.
I'd rather crumble than all of a sudden just start like macking.
Yeah, because there are known things that as a player, that will get you over.
Exactly.
And you don't want to do that.
No, especially solo. I mean, I have high. I don't know. I'm my own. I'm my own biggest critic. That might be the best place to. That might be the best place to end it.
All right. Well, just one quick thing at the end for you is where do things head for you from here? You're very much like mid-career player in my mind. That has a lot of ambition musically. Yeah. Where do you see?
I'm been touring quite a bit for many years now, and what I'd like to do, I've been working, and getting to do work with my own ensembles, but also getting to tour and do some things with some of my heroes, which has been really nice. I've been playing on and off with someone like Tim Byrne now for almost 20 years. I've gotten to play with Bill Frisell quite a bit in the last few years. He's one of my childhood heroes, and playing a lot with one of my childhood friends, Craig Taborn, and a lot of his ensembles, and some great saxophone players. And I'm also I did Julian Lodge's new record, and I typically try to do my own ensembles, but if there's somebody that I feel really a connection with and a special thing that wants me to try to contribute something to their music, then the last few years I threw my hat in the ring a little bit more, just because I had some openings, and that was nice to get called by people. I worked with John Zorn quite a bit or a little bit in the last year, and some other people that were really interesting to work with. For me, I would like to attempt to tour a little bit less. I don't want to sound like the work isn't greatly appreciated, but I think that I'm between my own bands and that I'll get chances to, the Bad Plus tours quite a bit all over the world. My trucking band has been doing good stuff, and Happy Apple, is trying to come back from a longer hiatus, but we have always been out there dealing, and thankfully all these bands can also tour internationally and do whatever. The thing for me is to try and stay healthy and not burn out. And sometimes some of the fatigue and some of the things, I just don't ever want it to touch the playing. So far the playing has been fine, and my space for being able to be there when the show starts. But I think it would be healthier for me in the future to play a little bit less, maybe do a little teaching and do whatever. And so I think, I'm 48 now. I'm thinking that maybe when my 50s begin, I might try and be in a space to be able to say no a little bit more. And I don't mean to sound like say no like I'm being asked up, but like actually like say I gotta rest up a little bit here and there. You know what I mean?
That sounds like a good place to be in,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. I mean, you've had a chance, like you said, to sit down with some of your heroes and play.
Yeah.
And I mean, that must have been great for you.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you're just like, it's that classic thing where you're like, I don't want to say no at this point to certain things, and also keeping my own ensembles going and making sure those are my priority, because that's always been my priority, is to play my music or music that I'm connected to with a band and a working band, and at the same time getting to play with certain people that were really inspiring to me, and getting to work with different people, and working like people like working on and off with Josh Redman now for about 4 or 5 years. I'm going to be doing a tour with his Old New Dreams tribute, so just the lineage of Dewey, who I also toured with, Dewey Redman, before he died. Getting to do those things is an incredible experience, and getting to play with certain musicians that inspire me, and at the same time I just want to be able to live a little bit more rested.
So it sounds like you're going to chase down some balance.
Trying.
Yeah.
We'll see. I've got a daughter in college, and I got to, you got to pay for that shit.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So. Well, Dave King, thanks so much for being here tonight to play with Happy Apple and to be part of the podcast.
Paul.
Yeah.
You're a great musician yourself. It's wonderful to talk with you.
All right. Well, good night and thanks.
Thanks.
And there you have it. Dave King, Kuiper Pass podcast. Also a bonus at the end, a stunning example of how I can become uncomfortable when complimented. So I'll send that to my psychiatrist. We'll work on that. Thank you for listening. Brought to you as always by the Kuiper Pass Cafe in St. Paul, Minnesota. Authentic Afghan cuisine. So, until next time, this is your host, Paul Metzger, saying so long and thanks for listening.